Pat Daniels, how are you? You're muted.
Hi, Charlene. Good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been forever.
I know.
Recording in progress.
See you later. See you later. Why am I not?
Okay. All right, everybody, we're going to get started. Welcome, those of you in the audience and those of you who are here with us in person. I'm so excited. I just have a couple opening comments before we get started with our wonderful panelists. My name is Kim Gamble. I'm with Anderson Construction, and I'm just one of the AGC DEI Council work group members. So again, welcome to our first meeting. I want to thank everybody for being here today. I wanted to give you an update on what the work group has been doing and a little update on Safe from Hate. 2 years ago, a group of industry professionals passionate about change came together and formed Safe from Hate, which developed the 4-pillar pledge. These 4 pillars: zero tolerance for unacceptable behaviors, which include harassment, discrimination, bullying, and other hostile behaviors; implementation and expansion of a positive job site culture through education, leadership, and cultural change; support for and recruitment of diverse talent, and expansion of support for our pre-apprenticeship programs, which are critical pipeline for our industry; and cultivating retention and expanding leadership development efforts to purposely ensure that our women, LGBTQIA members, and persons of color not only have an equal opportunity for advancement, but receive formalized mentoring and equitable opportunities to thrive and lead in this industry. So those are the 4 pillars. The Safe from Hate work group is made up of public owners, contractors, trade associations, unions, apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, minority contracting associations, and most importantly, a trades worker equity group, all working together to create a shared work plan that we can all utilize to work toward a common goal. Earlier this year, the AGC Oregon Columbia chapter DEI work group was established with the primary goal of creating a space where people passionate about DEI can come together, where contractors can share their best practices, learn from one another, and provide a structured platform for this work. Work group members include myself, Mel Jones from Hoffman, Lee Fleming from Skanska, Afton Walsh of Walsh Construction, Sarah Eubanks of Walsh Construction, Steve Mullaney of PNC Construction, Dan Heichelbeck of Southland Industries, Bruce Smith of OTAC, Ann Tyler of EC Electric, and Mike Salzgiver from the AGC, with support from Coral Ginocchio, Victoria Schultz, Carla Holland, and Asha Aiello also of the AGC. And I just want to thank all of them for giving their time. They're passionate about this work, and it adds to our normal workload. So I just want to say thank you for working to make this industry better. The things we've been working on this year include the organization of sessions such as today's, collaborating with AGC to launch their DEI webpage coming soon. Super excited about it. Working on the Safe from Hate shared work plan and outlining how we can support smaller contractors with DEI efforts. Recently, the Safe from Hate Trades Worker Equity Group shared a report with recommendations on what they believe can be done to make the industry more welcoming for women and persons of color. The AGC DEI work group will be evaluating the Trades Worker Equity Group's recommendations for contractors and trade associations, breaking it down into categories such as training and education, policy and procedure best practices, and administrative and communication practices, and subdividing into smaller work groups to tackle these recommendations. If you're interested in participating, please contact me or Coral at the AGC. Okay, off to the good stuff. So I want to introduce our speakers, starting with Dr. Maura Kelly, who is an associate professor of sociology at Portland State University. Her evaluation research for public agencies and nonprofits in Oregon and Washington has assessed a variety of programs intended to increase the recruitment and retention of diverse workers in the trades. Today, she will provide research findings about why the women and people of color leave the construction industry and share ways the industry can increase the recruitment and retention of a diverse workforce. Also with us today is Nickeia Hunter from the Oregon Tradeswomen and Lauri Rollings, also from Oregon Tradeswomen. Nickeia has been a union carpenter with Local 146 since 2011 and has worked in the field as a journey worker and site supervisor. She's an active member of her local and serves as a board member for the Carpenter Training Center's Equity and Diversity Inclusion Council, as well as a mentor to tradeswomen in Oregon and Southwest Washington. Off the job site, Nickeia is a skilled advocate for social justice and police accountability. She is an engaged community member in Vancouver. Thank you, by the way. Participating in the NAACP of Vancouver, Clark County Justice Group, Washington Coalition for Police Accountability, Next Steps Washington, and Not This Time. She is also a governor's appointee to the Washington State Criminal Justice Commission. Now as the culture change liaison for Oregon Tradeswomen, Nickeia brings a positive attitude and a wealth of experience to help ensure more job sites are free of harassment, hazing, and hate. Lauri Rollings is the CEO of Lauri Rollings and Associates and Oregon Tradeswomen's interim director for Rise Up Oregon, a respectful workplace program designed to provide all workers with the tools and support necessary to create and maintain a safe, inclusive, and productive environment for everyone. See how I'm starting to speed up? I don't get behind. Lauri provides consulting services promoting recruiting and retention of women for people of color in the construction industry. She's a steering committee member of the Safe from Hate Alliance, a group of construction industry stakeholders dedicated to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, which you heard me just talk about. Rollings previously served as executive director of the Plumbing and Mechanical Contractors Association of Oregon and executive director of the Plumbing, Mechanical, and Sheet Metals Contractors Alliance of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Before joining the construction industry, she practiced law for more than a decade, and before that was a newspaper reporter. Rollings graduated with honors from both Stanford Law and University of Wisconsin. And with us virtually, we have Pat Daniels from Constructing Hope. She is the executive director of Constructing Hope. Pat guided her organization from the former Community Development Corporation to the Constructing Hope pre-apprenticeship training program. She developed training curriculum with industry partners at Northwest College of Construction, Hoffman Construction, and Pacific Northwest Carpenters Institute, receiving state certification in 2007. Under her leadership, Constructing Hope has increased job placements from 16 to 83 annually. She has developed direct entry with carpenters, laborers, electrical, cement masons, sheet metal, iron workers, bricklayers, and the Northwest College of Construction apprenticeship programs. Ms. Daniels was raised in Mississippi and Northeast Portland. She earned her MBA at Concordia College, and as an African-American woman, worked her way up from secretarial duties to executive director. She is also an active member of her church community. Before we get started, Coral and Victoria will be moderating the session. If you're here virtually and you have questions, you can raise your hand or send her a question in the chat. We are recording. Hope everybody is okay with that. If you want to send a confidential question, just direct it directly to Coral. And with that, I'll hand it over to Maura.
Great, thanks so much. So again, my name is Maura Kelly. I'm a faculty member at Portland State, and I've been doing this research since 2011. And in my research, I have, no worries, I have worked with a variety of stakeholders on different projects related to recruitment and retention. I've had varying levels of access to decision-making around some of these policies and processes. And I hope that I can bring a unique vantage point into these conversations through my work as a researcher and the ways that I've been involved in some of these initiatives. I know that other folks can speak to other aspects of this work, and I'm really excited to be able to share it with you, particularly in these sorts of settings. I love to hear what questions you have that I can answer now, and what questions you have that I can think about to include in my future research. So I'm definitely looking forward to the Q&A portion. In my research, I've used interviews, focus groups, job site surveys on active construction sites, and we've just completed a large-scale survey of Oregon apprentices. And we also look at administrative data. The funding for these projects come from ODOT and BOLI, a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, but other public agencies as well, including TriMet and the City of Seattle. All right, see if I can get my things going here. Okay, perfect. So those of you involved in this work are probably familiar with this data. This is a sneak preview of data that we are currently analyzing that will be in our 2020 report. But I have just a few things to share from you from the data that we're working on this summer. So in our most recent study period, 2020, 2021, about 9% of all new apprentices were women, and about 26% were people of color. And I've also shared with you some of the trends over time. So as you can see, the construction workforce, well, here specifically incoming apprentices, is becoming more diverse. But if you look closely, you'll see that these trends are largely driven by increased participation of Latino men. That's the orange bar on this figure. And we've made fewer gains in terms of recruiting women and other groups of men of color. On the retention side, this data shows completion rates. So this would be folks that started apprenticeships in 2014 and 2015, and we looked at whether or not they had completed their apprenticeship by our study period 2020-2021. So as you can see, about half of all apprentices who begin an apprenticeship will finish. We could talk more about that, but what I would really like to focus on here is the discrepancies in completion rates across race gender groups. So there's something going on here, right? So not only are large numbers of people leaving the industry after entering, that we're seeing that women and people of color are likely, and in some cases much more likely, to not complete their apprenticeships compared to white men. So what's going on there? So again, a little sneak preview. This is from our survey of Oregon apprentices. We just finished collecting the data, so I have just a little bit of the qualitative data to share with you today. So these were folks that terminated an apprenticeship in 2020 and 2021. So not surprisingly, COVID was an issue that people stated was the main reason that they left. That's not too surprising. Injury and illness, another reason. So we got some kind of general comments around health, could be COVID related, maybe not. And we also had some notes about injuries, both on the job and off the job, that kept people from continuing. This is common. We found this in previous years, right? There's always going to be some number of people that we lose for those reasons. The next theme was a lack of work. So some of this was related to COVID. I think that's what's being alluded to here with the big shutdowns and layoffs comment. But from our participants, we found that this was a pretty consistent reason why people left. And this has been true since I've been doing this research for the last 10 years, that if folks are not consistently working, they're going to go someplace else where they can find consistent work. It's just not feasible for an apprentice to be out of work for a significant portion of the year, particularly early on when they don't have access to unemployment. Perhaps they're coming out of low wage work or poverty, right? There's just lots of reasons why that lack of consistent work continues to be a challenge for apprentices, even when we are in this moment of labor shortages, right? Where here on the contractor side, we can't get enough people. And on the apprentice side, we're saying there's not enough work for me to be able to continue in this industry. And the other thing I would say about this is the research that we've done to date has found that women and people of color experience this more harshly than white men. And some of the data we've looked at shows that women and people of color accrue on the job hours more slowly than white men. So there's kind of a lot going on there. I could talk a little bit more about why that might be, but we see that lack of work is a problem for all apprentices, but it has a disproportionate impact on women and people of color. Another issue that's consistently come up over the last 10 years is a lack of access to on-the-job training or mentoring. This is particularly unfortunate that the whole model of apprenticeship is that apprentices are learning the skills of their trade on the job. So when apprentices go onto job sites and they're not learning anything, they're cleaning, they're flagging, right? This is a reason that people leave, that if they're not going to learn the skills that they are told in their classes that they're going to learn, then that's a reason that people leave. Job site harassment continues to be a significant issue. In some of our research, we've documented, and I'll share a bit of this, sort of how widespread these experiences of harassment and discrimination are. And so I think that's important to know. But I think it's also really important to point out this is the main reason that some people leave, right? It's not just sort of another problem that people experience. This is when we ask people, what was the main reason you left? A good number of folks said it was these job site culture issues. And the last theme that comes out from these responses is responses that are sort of along the lines of not a good fit or chose another career. And this I always want to think a little bit more carefully about, because I think what I've heard in the industry is people often interpret this as people don't like the physical nature of the job, working in the weather, early morning hours. And from these comments, it's not exactly clear what those folks were referring to. But in the interviews that I've done, where I'm able to talk in more depth with folks, it is very rarely any of those issues. The reason that people say things like it's not a good fit is because they were being harassed every day at work. It's because they weren't learning the skills of their trade. It's because they weren't working consistently and they were worried about making ends meet. So I think that we really need to think carefully about what does it mean to say someone's not a good fit. I do want to say, it is true that construction is not for everybody, right? That we are going to see some amount of attrition, particularly in early periods of apprenticeship. Some folks are going to get out there and decide that it's not for them. But where I'm really concerned is where we're seeing women and people of color disproportionately saying that. And it's not in reference to kind of the work of construction itself, but it's due to some of these other factors that we certainly can address in the industry. Okay, so as I mentioned, this work and the findings I just presented are funded by, is part of research funded by ODOT and BOLI. And the main reason for that is I'm evaluating their, I always get the program, get this right, the ODOT BOLI Construction Workforce Development Program. So this program is specifically for apprentices in the highway trades because it's funded by ODOT. So you'll see that the overall completion rates are even lower than if we look at all trades. But the headline here is that folks that receive services through this program are more likely to complete than those that don't. So these don't even directly address some of those main problems that I was talking about on the last slide. But what these programs do is provide support to apprentices. So some of this is financial support, right? So you can, if you give someone $500 to fix their car, they're going to come to work on Monday. And if they can't get their car fixed, they're not going to be there on Monday. So some of this really is about meeting people's immediate needs so that they can stay in the trades. But what we found in previous years is that it's the non-financial support that is particularly impactful on completion rates. That folks that get this mentoring, folks that have someone to call when they have a problem and will help them access other resources, will give them advice, right? Those are the kinds of things that can really help impact retention. And so I always think that there's a clear business case here, right? It's very expensive to lose apprentices. A lot of money goes into training apprentices. And it seems to me as though a relatively small investment in retention services will ultimately be worth it if you're able to improve those completion rates and get those folks all the way through and into their career in the trades. Okay, so one strategy here is additional support for apprentices. I think this is a great model. There's aspects of this that can be taken up by other public agencies, by contractors, by unions, right? So I think that some of these elements can definitely transfer to lots of places across the industry. All right, so the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is my research on some of the different respectful workplace models. And I'm so glad I have some of my terrific colleagues here to talk in a little bit more detail about that in just a moment. But for now, I'm going to focus on my findings from the evaluation research that I've done on these three different implementations of respectful workplace models. I do want to say ahead of time that these are not strictly comparable. You're going to see me compare them on the next couple of slides, but I just want to say they're different. Obviously, there's two different programs here. There's the Green Dot for the trades, and then the Acceptable Work Sites training, which is modeled after a News Rise Up program, which we'll hear more about in a moment. So there's differences in the programs. There was differences in when they were implemented, how many job sites, the type of job sites, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of nuance here, all of which is available in these reports if you want to know the nitty-gritty on all of that. But when we're looking at this across all of these studies, I'm looking for two main outcomes in terms of impacting job site culture. So the first is, do the tools provided in these trainings make people more able to do something when they see harassment on a construction job site? And doing something can mean a lot of different things. It can mean directly intervening. It can mean checking in with someone later. It can be referring it to a supervisor to deal with. It can be a formal report. And in this work, we'll often hear that referred to as bystander intervention. So one thing we want to see is, if you provide people with these tools, will they use them, right? So that's kind of one of the major outcomes that we're looking at. The second and ultimate goal here is to see decreases in job site harassment. And the way that we measure this, again, through these job site surveys, is we ask folks about whether or not they've seen specific kinds of behaviors on their job site in the last month. And I'll share with you some of the behaviors that we look at. And this comes from 10 years of research about kind of what the most common types of harassment and discrimination are on job sites. Okay, let's get into the findings. So here, looking at that first outcome, are people that receive training more likely to intervene and do something in response to harassment than folks that don't get the training? And so here we've got some really positive, promising news that if you give people these tools, they will use them. Right. I think that is really exciting. When we first started this work, I wasn't sure if this would happen, right? Dealing with these issues on construction job sites is really challenging, and nobody expected change to happen quickly or easily. So I think from these initial studies, it's really promising that we're seeing that these tools have potential to change people's behavior on construction job sites. So this is the good news. This slide shows where we are in terms of the impact of these programs on reducing harassing behaviors. So in only one of the 3 studies did we see a decrease, and here it was only a slight decrease in how much harassment we saw from the beginning of the project until the end. And on that Multnomah County project, that this was one of the stronger implementations. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But even at the end of 2 years of implementation, we still were seeing folks reporting about 7 instances of harassment on the job in the last month. So that's still a lot of harassment. And so I think that we can do better. I think that as these programs have matured and developed, I think we're in a much better place to start seeing these numbers come down further and faster. I'll talk a little bit more about what was going on with the other 2 projects in just a moment. So as I mentioned, here are some of the behaviors that we ask about. This is from the TriMet site, but these trends tend to be very similar across all of the different projects. So you can see that the most common types of harassment are verbal harassment, but we also see people being isolated or ignored, denied opportunities to learn new skills. That's getting at that lack of mentorship. Sexual harassment continues to be an issue. So these are sort of the range of issues that we tend to see on these job sites. And I always like to share a little bit of the workers' words when I'm giving these presentations. So on these surveys, the job site surveys, we asked folks to describe some of the harassment and discrimination that they experienced. These are pretty typical for the kinds of responses that I've gotten over the years and the different kinds of data collection that I've done. The one exception here is that third example where we see what happened after. Usually in these sorts of things, there's nothing happens afterwards. And so this third example is interesting in that this participant was articulating not only what happened, but the follow-up, which seems like a very appropriate follow-up in the situation that was described. The other thing I want to say about this is that there's a little bit of a tension here in terms of the message I want to share. That on the one hand, these experiences disproportionately impact women and people of color. Obviously, the sort of specific gender and race-based harassment discrimination, but even sort of the general, what we might call, job site hostility, that this impacts everybody. And so I really want to kind of balance that message, right? So that on the one hand, this is disproportionately impacting women and people of color. On the other hand, this is a problem that impacts everybody. Most people don't want to be disrespected at work, right? And so I think that we really need to kind of keep both of those things in mind when we kind of move forward in this work. Okay, so this table kind of summarizes the outcomes across the 3 studies. So the Multnomah County project, you see here, very high levels of exposure to the program, strong representation of people that received that additional training, strong numbers of interventions. Like all studies, we saw that folks that received training were more likely to intervene. As I shared before, we did see fairly high levels of harassment at the end of the project, but we did see an overall decrease over the course of the study. The city of Seattle, this one's a little bit trickier to interpret. There's a couple things going on here. The other 2 projects were a single site. The city of Seattle had me evaluate across multiple sites. And because of project start and end dates, not all the same studies were included in all the same waves of data. So again, not exactly comparable. But what we see here is, I guess the other thing I would say about the city of Seattle, this was 2019 to 2021. COVID hit this project hard. There were serious challenges with both the implementation and the evaluation, particularly in early to mid 2020. Another piece of this is that in the same time period, we saw a dramatic increase of racist hate crimes on construction job sites, not just in Seattle, across the industry, across the country. So, kind of a lot going on here, but we did see fairly high exposure to the program. We saw low numbers for that additional training, which is really key, right? We need to have folks experiencing ongoing training, reminders of these tools, opportunities to practice, right? And so this is one of the big challenges, largely due to COVID, some other factors involved too, that there wasn't as full of an implementation as I think many of us would have liked to have seen. Here we see pretty low numbers of interventions, not surprising, given that there not a huge number of people had training. One of the interesting things here is that despite some of those challenges, the city of Seattle job sites still had lower levels of harassment than the Oregon sites. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but that's what we found in the research. And then finally, the green dot for the trades. This was another a little bit unusual one. The initial implementation happened about a year before we did the evaluation. So what we did is we came in and did a first wave of data collection. We asked the contractor to do a booster session of green dot to see if we would see any change between our first and second wave of data after folks got that booster session. So overall, strong numbers of in terms of implementation, very strong numbers in terms of how likely people were to intervene. But again, ending with fairly high levels of harassment. We didn't see a decrease during the study period. All previous research suggests that a single training is not going to make an impact. And so here, just a little bit additional evidence that that continues to be the case. All right, I know there's a lot going on there. I'm happy to take any questions in the Q&A. All right, so I wanted to take a moment and talk a little bit about sort of my perspective as a sociologist. So sociologists tend to look at complex organizations in terms of multiple levels. So the institutional level or the macro level, the interactional level or the meso level, and the individual or micro level. And so in thinking about construction, I've sort of broken it down this way. And I think this can be helpful in thinking about how we might intervene at some of these different levels. So at the institutional level, I'm drawing on theorist Joan Acker, who talked about the ways in which it is the ideologies, policies, and practices of an organization that perpetuate inequality. And so through that lens, I think it's helpful to think about what changes we might see in the industry to start to address this at an institutional level. So first, making this a priority. And I think this is a place where, I expect many of you here and across the industry, we're on board with this, right? That some exceptions, but I think for the most part, people in leadership positions see that this is a problem and they don't want this level of harassment and discrimination on their job sites. So I think that as far as the ideology, the willingness to commit to this kind of change, I think we are, this is where we're really close. And this is why it's a really exciting time to do this work, because I'm really seeing more support for this kind of work than in the entire time I've been doing this. So that's really exciting. One of the challenges that I've seen in the implementations is this question of sort of whose responsibility is it? I've seen these programs be most effective when there's a point person who has one of their primary job responsibilities to ensure the Respectful Workplace Initiative moves forward. So this includes things like making sure the trainings happen, if there's a service provider, like Oregon Tradeswomen doing Rise Up, connecting those folks with the contractor, with the public agency, with the evaluator. So when there is someone who can really take this up as their primary responsibility, that makes it much less likely to fall through the cracks. I want to be realistic. I know in construction, there's a huge number of competing priorities, and it's understandable why this sometimes falls to the bottom of that priority list. But if we want to address some of these problems that are really critical problems for the industry, if we can't keep up with the demand for workers, right, we really have to rethink how we're prioritizing some of this work. As far as the policies, I think having the policies in place for best practices is really critical. We have some great expertise. The Rise Up folks can give some advice on how to ensure that your organization's policies are following those best practices. And of course, we don't expect that we're going to eliminate harassment discrimination. So making sure that we have the right process in place for dealing with it when it happens. And another piece of this is making it visible. And this is where implementing a model like Green Dot or Rise Up can be really helpful in demonstrating visibly to workers that this is a priority of the organization. And so I say here, it's partially the messaging, right? That we want those banners on the job sites. We want to hear kind of those talking points from leadership, but we also need to make sure that it's happening on an ongoing basis with these kinds of trainings and booster sessions for workers. I think that that is one of the best ways to communicate to workers that this is a priority of the organization, that this is an expectation of behavior and an expectation, particularly for those that are in supervisory roles. And then as a researcher, you may not be surprised that I'm suggesting we evaluate, but I think this is actually really important because these programs are still being developed and refined. And if a program's not working, we want to know so we can adjust, right? And do something that is going to have an impact on our construction job sites.
What are you thinking is ongoing?
Yeah, so my best advice is having trainings. One of the initial estimates was about 20% of the workforce receiving kind of a longer, like 1 hour bystander training, and then monthly booster sessions. So 5 to 10 minutes, like at a toolbox talk. None of the implementations to date have been able to meet that goal of once a month contact with the program. I think that for me, again, we'll see as the research continues if that's the right number, but I think that's a really important goal in order to keep this on people's minds, right? In order to make sure people know what these tools are. I think that that kind of regular, and I'm suggesting once a month, kind of contact with the program is going to be needed. Okay, next on to the, oh, I don't think I can change my. Okay, no worries. Okay, next to the interactional level. So again, here, this is where we're trying to adjust how workers interact on the job. And so again, I'm really emphasizing this idea of ongoing training, provide workers with some tools. The research to date already shows that if you give workers these tools, they will use them. So I feel very confident about this recommendation. And the other piece here is the special role for people in supervisory positions. There's a couple things going on here. One is that we often see that it is people in supervisory positions, journey workers, foremen, who are the ones that are harassing and discriminating against other workers. So that's something we definitely need to deal with in the industry. And the other piece is that oftentimes these folks don't necessarily have the skills to deal with those kinds of interpersonal conflict. They haven't gotten the message that it's a core part of their job to address harassment and discrimination when they see it. So I think that getting that, what I've seen is a little bit of a disconnect from the senior leadership of an organization that really wants this to happen, and how that message and that commitment trickles down through the organization to those frontline workers. And so this is one of the things that I think really needs to be at the top of the agenda. And some of these programs have been really thoughtful in creating special trainings for people who are supervising others to help give them these skills to be able to deal with these issues when they come up on the job site. And then finally, at the individual level, I think there's a couple of things that leadership can do to help improve workers' knowledge. So first, providing information about acceptable behavior. I think this mostly already happens, maybe sometimes in a little bit perfunctory way at orientation. But some of these other pieces I think can really be built on educating workers about how these issues negatively impact everybody, and also sharing the ways in which they disproportionately impact women and people of color. And we've seen in this research and others, the ways that those personal stories and experiences can really build empathy and help people understand why this is a problem, why this is something that they should care about. All right, so to put it all together, we've got these 3 different levels of addressing this issue. I think it is going to be critical to address them at all levels. The last thing I want to say about the individual level is that I have heard stories from folks that are participating or leading these trainings, that these trainings can fundamentally change people's knowledge and beliefs, right? I've heard stories where people come out of these trainings with increased understanding, enthusiasm, they're ready to go back to their job site and be the champions for this work on their job site. But that's not going to be everybody, right? And so I think it's important to think about, it's perhaps a more realistic goal, is to think about how we can shift people's behavior, right? Shifting people's beliefs, particularly when they're sexist and racist beliefs, is very challenging and arguably is outside the scope of what we can accomplish in the construction trades. But what we can deal with is how people interact on the job. There's lots of ways in which we do that, right? That there's beliefs people hold that we would not want them to share on a job site. So I think that thinking about we want to connect to people and change those hearts and minds, but even if we can't, we can still ensure that people get the information about what is and is not acceptable in their job site. All right, so I want to leave you with just a couple of recommendations. So the first piece is, we've sort of had this stagnation in these recruitment trends. We need some additional efforts here to provide more opportunities. My work is focused more on the retention side. The one tool that we have been able to empirically document as a way to increase the diversity of the construction workforce is pre-apprenticeship. That if you want more women and people of color in the trades, you need to fund more cohorts of pre-apprentices, right? That is the mechanism that we've been able to document as a successful way to diversify the construction workforce. There's other things as well, right? So certainly have heard about how job fairs, connections with community organizations, right? Folks have found some useful tools there. But I think we need to really just rethink these traditional pathways into the trades and start thinking about some alternatives. On the retention side, through the evidence from the ODOT BOLI program, we see that even providing kind of moderate funds and resources towards retention services can really impact retention rates among apprentices. These respectful workplace initiatives, I think, are really critical. I think this is where the industry has to go. I don't think the levels of job site harassment and discrimination are sustainable over the long term. So I do really think that this is where the work is going. I recommend implementing one of these models. I personally have a preference for Rise Up. It's a little bit more comprehensive. And so I'm sure my colleagues will talk a little bit more about what all that involves. And then the last piece is thinking about these questions of access to on-the-job hours. This is a big question. If we have time, we can follow up in the Q&A. But I know this is just would be a big shift in the industry in terms of rethinking that particular issue. So thanks so much. I'm so thankful to be able to share my research with you all today, and I'm really looking forward to what my colleagues have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Maura, and we'll pass it on to Nickeia.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Nickeia, as they said. Oh, thank you, Lauri. My partner, Lauri, and I work for Oregon Tradeswomen. I'm a graduate of the program from 2011. And to me, the Rise Up program is a program that will make it more inclusive for workers to not struggle through their apprenticeship, to not have hurdles put in their way before they even understand what the job descriptions are. I went through a pre-apprenticeship program that was about 90 days. It gave me a little bit of insight into what all of the different unions had to offer, the benefits, the gains, the great things that could come from it. But what they failed to tell me was that it would be a very hard earned journeyman title to get through the program. It was a 4-year program with the carpenters that took me 7 years. It took me 7 years to complete, and it wasn't due to my dragging any behind, my derriere, so to speak. I showed up every day with my own tools. I owned lasers, I owned drills, I owned every piece of machinery that I needed to be successful, because I was never given all of the equipment like my counterparts. I was never set up for success. And I don't believe that it was solely because of me being a woman or me being Black. I think it was because of a culture that has been allowed to be adapted and implemented, where white men are more apt to finish the program faster because they do get the overtime hours and they are afforded the education and the training by their counterparts who show that belonging to them. It's really hard to show up and be the best you every day when you're treated as though you don't belong from the time you got there. So I thank you all for your interest and your passion in moving what it will take to make an inclusive workforce. I know that this is an important thing for me. I'm a third generation carpenter. My dad told me I couldn't do it. He said that I wouldn't make it, that it wasn't a place for women my size or color. And in a sense, as I look back over my 12 years, he was right, but he was wrong. We can be the change that we cannot see, and we can make the roads comfortable for each other. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Nickeia. Thanks for sharing your personal story. It's personal stories like that that I think are really powerful and are really a key part of what we do through the Rise Up model at Oregon Tradeswomen, because they help people develop empathy, as Dr. Kelly's research suggests, which is a key part in changing the culture in a way that it needs to change in order for women and people of color to be successful in these trades programs. And I just want to share a little bit more on a high level about what Rise Up is, and what the components are, and how it's kind of fits hand in glove with the research that Dr. Kelly just shared, because it is an evidence-based, best practices-based program that was developed by ANU, which is a sister organization of Oregon Tradeswomen in Seattle. It's also a pre-apprenticeship program that's designed to give women job readiness skills to prepare them for a career in construction. And the folks at ANU observed a lot of the same things that we've observed here in Portland at Oregon Tradeswomen, and just, those of us who do this work in this industry, which are the types of things that Dr. Kelly talked about, that harassment and discrimination are really the key drivers that we're seeing force women and people of color out of this industry. And so what Rise Up does is take a multi-pronged approach that addresses all three of these levels of buy-in that Dr. Kelly was talking about: the institutional level, the interactional level, and the individual level. And so some of the key pieces of it are, at a high level, we educate leadership about the importance of making a very visible commitment to making culture change on job sites. And we do that by sitting down with your leadership team and kind of introducing you to the program and some of the research that backs up the types of things that we see, and the types of things that are actually going to be effective on job sites to change some of the behaviors that Dr. Kelly was talking about. Then we sit down with you and your people to learn more about, what kinds of things they're experiencing in the workplace that need to be addressed, so we can help you sort of customize a training program that you can then deploy in the field. We also recommend that you form a culture committee so that you're getting real life experience and feedback from different voices within your organization and your job sites in terms of what they're experiencing on the job site, to address that disconnect that Dr. Kelly identified in terms of the leadership team having a goal to reduce harassment and discrimination and increase participation by women and people of color, but what's actually happening in the field. So you can help leadership really understand and operationalize what are the barriers to us getting to that place where everybody has full participation and feels included and safe on the job site. One of the other factors in the Rise Up program is that we provide mentorship and leadership development as well, because Dr. Kelly's research shows, and our experience backs up, that women and people of color in particular really benefit from having people who look like them helping mentor them through the apprenticeship program. So that they just have people to turn to when they experience negative behaviors on the job site, or even just having somebody to ask a question like, how did you deal with this when this happened to you on the job site? And Nickeia, you may have had a mentor that may have sort of helped you, probably your dad or your grandpa, since you're a third generation carpenter. And, you know, the research and the anecdotal evidence demonstrates that that's really effective in terms of helping keep people in the trade. And then the fifth piece, which is one of the biggest pieces, is training your team at all levels, at that leadership level, so the institutional level, at the supervisory level, which would correspond with that interactional level, and then at the individual level as well. And those trainings are tailored for each of those different roles. So at the leadership level, we talk a lot about sort of the high level theoretical piece of it and the need for this kind of training. At the supervisory level, we train supervisors not only to not harass and discriminate and how not to do it and how it shows up. And we talk about things like unconscious bias and how that plays a role in how you may sort of unconsciously might be favoring or disfavoring certain workers. But then we also train individual trades workers on how to spot harassment and discrimination in the workplace, and then how to respond to it if you are the recipient of that kind of behavior, or how to respond to it if you are a bystander witnessing someone else experiencing that kind of behavior. So the bystander intervention is a really key component of the program, and really where we focus a lot of our energy, because we know that the key leadership team is not on the job site every day. They can't be there policing the job site every day. And so we really want to empower individual workers to know that if they see something that's wrong or that makes them uncomfortable, that they really can and should speak up and say something about it or do something about it. And so we give individual workers and supervisors tools on how to diffuse different situations, and a lot of different tools that maybe, you know, work in different scenarios so that they have a flexible toolkit that they can use to try and interrupt some of these behaviors and promote a more respectful workplace. So that's kind of the Rise Up program in a nutshell, and I'd be happy to answer any questions once we've heard from Pat on her piece.
Thank you, Lauri. Pat, are you with us?
Yes. Uh-oh. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Oh, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pat Daniels, and I'm the Executive Director at Constructing Hope. And so a lot of what Maura has shared with you and my colleagues as well, Lauri and Nickeia, it's great to see you guys. I'm not going to repeat what they said, but I want to just reiterate this. When I asked what were the challenges, and for me, it is the disconnect or the choice that people do not understand historic racism. And I want to take us back to say that, you know, all of this started with slavery. And remember that all of these things have been embedded, and it's embedded in our education system. It's embedded in the workforce. It's embedded in housing. It's embedded in healthcare. So when we're looking at this, we're not blaming just the construction industry. This is our entire system here that we're talking about. So how do people become low income? It's because you've been left out in every possible area. So the problem here is there is no blame. And so I think as we discuss this, people want to take things personally. You were not here in 18 whatever when we had slavery. And so we're not blaming you, but we do have a responsibility to make change. We know exactly what the problem is. You've heard it. You saw the results from the data and that Dr. Maura did. This data is from pre-apprentices from Constructing Hope and from Oregon Tradeswomen. So these are the people that we're serving. So I want to say that the problem is it's hard to accept change. You know, the whole world had an idea about people of color until they actually saw what happened to George Floyd. Well, for the Black community, we see this all the time. I'm glad that the whole world finally had a chance to see how we live and what happens in our communities. And so the problem is these communities have been left behind. And the thing is, we just want change and we want a seat at the table. So when I say, what are the roadblocks? The roadblock to me is still the same thing as understanding the racism, but also having management have the permission, give themselves permission to say that, yes, there is a problem and we can make change. You set the policies. When we think about these things, I have often said, it's a safety issue. How many times have you yourself just been upset about something and guess what? I can't function at work. Well, you know what? They can't either, but they're doing the best they can. And they're trying to work through because it's something that they want just as bad as the next person is to change my life and to have a better life. And I want to belong someplace and I want to do a good job, but I can't do it if I'm never given the opportunity, even though I'm pretended, it's presumptuous, it's pretentious to say that I'm giving you that opportunity and you should be grateful. So I hope that this is not too harsh, but it's just like, I feel like people, we can't see the growth. When I also think about, we have to understand that in this society, this has been a predominantly white male-led society. So when you're in that place, you can't see the effects of how being left behind long-term, it compiles itself. So the results is just even more frustration. So I think the roadblock is for everybody to understand that first, we have to choose to be the change. And I think we talked about that a little bit earlier. We have to choose to be more accountable to the behavior of our employees and accept that what we are doing, and we are perpetuating bad behavior, even though it's embedded in the policies and saying that it's okay, it is not. So how do we do this going forward? And it's like, one is truly looking at how you're running your business, how inclusive are you to bring people who don't look like you inside and give them the opportunity and the support. So hence the reason that I'm running a pre-apprenticeship training programs with my partners, Oregon Tradeswomen, Portland Youth Builders, and POIC. Our programs are designed to bring you people of color and provide that support that they need. When you think about, they're competing with somebody that maybe, if you grew up in this industry, you had a middle-class lifestyle. I grew up in a single-parent household. We didn't have a middle-class lifestyle. So now I want to be a carpenter, but I have never been introduced to it and I don't know what it means. Now I finally got an introduction, but I don't have the tools to get in. I didn't have that father, brother, in-law. My mom don't own a car. I don't have a car. My first job was at McDonald's and now I've heard about this. How do I enter the door? There's no way to enter that door. So you're leaving behind a lot of people that want that opportunity. So when you look at our pre-apprenticeship training programs, what we're doing is we're providing everything that the low income and women need in order to make that transition. What we're doing here is we're providing hands-on skills. We're making sure that they have a certification. And most of all, these programs that we're talking about today, the Safe from Hate, all of these things were established from pre-apprenticeship because we're looking at the people and hearing them and hearing the needs that they have. And we're trying to fill the gap to help them become successful. And in helping them become successful is also creating the success for the organizations that they're being employed with. Because without diversity, who's going to think outside the box to come up with that next innovative idea that's going to change the way the industry is moving forward? Because otherwise you're staying in the box of what has always been done. And that's what we've done as far as how we're leaving out people and women of color. I'm really happy that we talked about the Positive Workplace, Safe from Hate group, and the toolbox talks. One of the things that I can say that my graduates have said is the places where they have toolbox talks. Now let's be clear, some of them there's no accountability. It's just a process. But for others, where the management team believes in it, it is not just a process. It has made change. People have stayed. And the number one, again, I'm saying the number one reason that people are really leaving their jobs is they cannot take the mental stress of not having a place to belong. So when I say what can we do going forward? What are you going to do to make sure that people feel a part of the organization? To make them feel like that they have a seat at the table and that they're being supported. This is what the pre-apprenticeship training programs do. When our people have a problem or an issue, we've already talked to them about how to move up the ladder to talk to that next person, the steward, or how can we make connections to talk to someone there to truly point out that there is a problem. Or you know what? we just move you to the next job site because that company may not do anything at all. And we continue to try and work with and educate them so that they can see that everybody has a role in making this change. So I just want to say pre-apprenticeship is probably, when you look at the 4 pre-apprenticeship training programs, we're bringing women to the table and we're supporting them. We're bringing youth to the table. The youth today, I don't know about your family, but my family doesn't look like me. We are all mixed up, and I have Hispanic, I have white, I have everything mixed in my family. We're Native American. So when you look at the cross reference, our kids are not going to stand for this. So when you're trying to bring youth in and the first time they experience this, this is something that they've never heard of. So they're not going to stay for that reason. It doesn't, this could be your next foreman. This could be your next person who's going to run the company for you. But we have to create an atmosphere that's welcoming and that makes them feel like they belong. And guess what? They're going to work harder than the next person because this is an opportunity that it's like, it's magical. It's something that they dreamed of and something that they aspire to be. So we make jokes about fathers, brothers, and in-laws. And I can say that the pre-apprenticeship training programs, we feel like we are the fathers, sisters, and in-laws for the people that come through our programs. So when you're bringing someone in from a pre-apprenticeship, they're being supported as far as workplace culture. They're being supported as far as support. The average person who didn't need this, their childcare is not an issue. But for somebody low income, I can't come to the class because I don't have childcare. We're removing those barriers for people to come to construction and be successful. And not because it's about the money, it's because they truly want to do this work. So when you think about these people coming to you and you're saying that there's a huge demand, but you're throwing away the people who really want to do it the most. So I'll leave it on that note to say, pre-apprenticeships are here to help you. Please think about the challenges that we face as far as understanding the depth of historic racism. And I don't know what I would call for not just racism, but how we treat women in the workplace. And that, it was an old saying that women need to be in the home. Well, a lot of people still feel that way about it. And when we get to the workforce, that's true. That's the way they're treating us. But in reality, I want you to know that 3 of the pre-apprenticeship training programs are run by women. 1 is run by a man. So women have a lot to contribute because we can see things that you don't. We see things differently. So we're always bringing a different eye to the table. So thank you for inviting me here. And all 4 pre-apprenticeship training programs are BOLI certified. So you're getting people who truly have a desire to want to be there. You're getting people who are already vetted. Basically, I can tell you, we are your temporary agency who has already vetted the people, checked them out, and bringing them to you with support. I don't think you can get any better than that. Thank you.
So well spoken. I see we have a hand raised in the virtual world of attendees. Sheldon?
Yes. Okay. I've been around this thing called the construction field in the Portland area for almost 30 years. And what I've seen here is the past 2 years about the safe from hate, nothing has changed. Everybody's still, no leadership. Leadership is still white. Supervisors are still white. Walk to the offices, you see white people. That's all you see. And you don't see any people of color in there. It doesn't, and when you go on a job site, I've been out here for 30 years. I finally got a foreman job after working 14 years in the business. Haven't been laid off, just haven't had the opportunity to become a foreman. As I sit and wait and train these apprentices come through, it's hard to sit there and when all of a sudden the guy you train become your boss. That's like, okay, that's great. I'm glad I taught him everything he need to know. Now he's in charge. So what do these folks out here, people of color, women, have to look for? There's no leadership out there. The foremen are white, the GFs are white. Maybe a few of them are person of color. That's maybe 3. I think 2, maybe less than that. But when you go out there, what do they got to look up to? How did he make it? And when it comes down to diversity, how to retain people. If it's not in a CBA or some kind of, we got to do this because it's in our contract. So we get our contract, we get all these people in there, all these people of color and people of women and people of color. We get those folks, and when the job is over, those folks are gone, and we're doing the same old cycle. See how good we're doing? Look how we're looking. We look great now until the job is over. I'm quite sure there's a few that can keep. There's a few that have a diamond in the rough. There's a few that can learn. You know, and it's hard to sit here and we talk about this, and it's really true. It's the FBI thing. Friends, families, and in-laws. You know, they get those jobs. They get the performance jobs. They come in knowing nothing. Comes on the list. They got out there, get called out. Because my dad works there. Come out as a journeyman. Don't know jack crap. But it's okay because they're family. It's personally, I'm not to be the Debbie Downer of this, but I don't see anything changing. And to this day, I still don't see anything changing. It doesn't matter what company you work for. It doesn't matter where I go. I see no change. And it's hard to sit there and go and expect something to happen, you know, like mentorship. Companies can do mentorship on their own. They can assign a person a mentor. It don't have to be a person of color. We just got to be a person who wants to teach. You know, the good guy, get a good guy to teach them with. It don't have to be all a person of color teaching someone else. It just has to be someone who is willing to teach someone something different. But until then, we have to be intentional on some of the stuff. You just can't sit and wait for it to fall in their lap. It ain't gonna fall in your lap. That's not gonna happen. Because in the end, it still comes down to one thing. And when it comes to the job, my friend need a job, I'm gonna keep him. Even though he might be a crappy worker, but I'll keep him anyway. You know, that's what I've seen out of all the years I've been here and all the things. And the main thing you walk through the door as a person of color and a woman, mainly Black person, you already been stereotyped from doing the day one you walk into that office until the day you still work there. You don't have to mess up one time, and all you hear is, "See what I told you? I told you that's what they do." They didn't say him. They don't say him. They say they. So y'all group everybody in one big lump sum of they. Like all people of color and women are the same. There are individuals. Every day there are individual people out there who has different things. You can't lump someone into that. And like I said, these companies, they got to do their job. There are some good people out there. But if you sit there and let them just sit there and just do nothing for them, they'll come to work, but they have no opportunity to move up. They'll work with the guys.
I really truly believe that this is an HR issue because everything that you just explained to me, and I know it very well, it is the HR system within the organization. So again, I'm saying we have to go back to our HR, our systems, and make sure that all policies are implemented. And there's policies about fathers and brothers and in-laws working, but I'm not sure. I mean, that would be the individual construction company. So again, looking at HR policies, and I do feel like hazing and bullying and harassing is a safety issue. And until we come to address those two things, to me, those are key issues that we talk about time after time after time.
But when you have, as a bystander thing, it's great to have a bystander intervention. So if the bystander go tell his foreman that this person is saying this, what's going to save the bystander's job? Or the victim who's out there who's getting harassed? If they come forward, who's going to save their job? I know it's some kind of policy against retaliation, but that could be easily washed away, easily saying, okay, she missed work, or he missed work, or he called in sick one day. You could easily get rid of that problem. We don't try to solve the problem. We get rid of the problem, not the solution. So we keep the same person that's there doing it, and you get with the person who came up with the harassment, and they just get rid of those guys, and everything is all great. But you still got the same cancer there. Nothing's changed. So until then, I don't know. Like I said, this retaliation comes in different ways. It don't have to be like straightforward.
Right.
That's construction.
Sheldon, thank you for your sharing. And, you know, we have a lot of change that has to happen. And we have a lot of people that are finally listening and I think are, want to see change. We have a question here in the audience. Dominic?
Hello. It's kind of a convoluted thing. I guess I'm a little bit of younger energy in the construction world. And over the course of, I've only been in construction for a year. And I got a boost to get in construction. And for me, it was about the education of knowing what the opportunity is for Black people in construction or minorities in construction, which got me excited about construction because I'm a bit of a rebel and like to see change and make a difference. But speaking to some of the things I've heard in the last couple of comments about kind of the equal level playing field on construction jobs and in construction work. And my answer to that is to go get your general contractor's license and become an owner, or become a get your general contractor's license. So then you can, and not even own your own company, because ownership isn't for everyone. Just so you can say, I've earned the right to be here with you and stand next to you or even be better than you. So you can't behave like that towards me. It's not always the victim mentality. I'm sorry, I had to work. I played basketball for 11 years in Europe, very successful at that. Decided to stop playing basketball, not because of I couldn't keep playing. It's because I was given an opportunity by Joel Anderson to recommend me to get into construction because of my communication skills or my know-how of my relationships, business-wise, or whatever I've connected through the basketball. But to me, the apprentice programs are great. I'm just getting in and would love to use some apprentices along the way as I grow my company. But again, I agree it's about the leadership at the top and the education of it and knowing and teaching and showing that everybody's equal in this workspace. Everybody should be comfortable. There's also rules in place that I think could be changed or modified of the clothing. I think to reach my demographic, which hasn't been spoke about, is the gear that you can wear. Whatever it is to make you comfortable, besides the colors, the lighting, or the reflective gear that we have to wear on certain job sites. But those type of things I think will reach at least the men in my demographic, the younger men. I'm only 35, but even younger, when we bring in these apprentices and these people, I think there should be an opportunity. If we want to bring in more color, we have to start at the top of whatever the rules of what the clothes should look like, because my demographic likes to look cool and feel cool when they work. And that's really important for them. I don't care how belittling or what it may sound like. That's what the draw is in anything that my demographic does. So I think that's really important to try to change that a little bit, or find out who to talk to change the rules or the guidelines of who votes and has the decision making on those things. Also, I was just talking to Aaron Storley, which is I'm sure is joining in, just about getting on more boards and things like that to speak to this, because this is an old man's sport. I don't like to say white man's sport. It's an old man's sport now, just like mechanics of carbureted cars, you know? It's an old man's sport. And the more we teach the ownership part of it, which I want to emphasize, the ownership part of it, which we're not teaching that for whatever reason. And my goal in my company and what I do is not only to do the work, but to also educate and bring Black men up behind me specifically. And I hate to even say that once again, because this isn't really what it's about, but I just think to change the energy in that, because we have to make it, the older men in the sport have to have a responsibility to give the information to the younger people. And you're not telling them how easy it is to get your general contractor's license, clearly. It's very easy. Without an education in construction, not to belittle the sport, because I call it a sport now, but not to belittle the sport of construction, it's not that hard. So and I've done that in my first few months of giving the education to friends of mine that are in roofing, that are working for somebody. I'm like, we can pay you as a subcontractor instead of who you're working for, because you're doing all the work anyway. You just don't have the education to know to go do your studying for 5-6 weeks and take your open book test and pass it. And then you have and people light up even more, and you're the same person, you just have a general contractor's license. They don't understand. I just think that's really important for me to say here. It was really important for me to be here, because I think that message for you guys too, to carry on in your studies of why, when you guys talk about, every time you guys talk about apprentices coming, you're talking about unions. Every construction company is not a union company. It's not ran by the same type of personalities of union owners. You know, the union energy is totally different than just my crew of 16 men and we're loving on each other, men now, but hopefully women, that can develop into that too. But I'm saying just the comfort and the fellowshipping of we're all equals. We don't care what color you are. We're bringing in more Black men on this. This is the goal. So that's what we're doing. And you make sure you're bringing them up and educating them as you're educating me. I'm the boss, but you're educating me too on what it's supposed to look like and how it's supposed to be professionally done. And I do my job of being here and doing my other things that make my business run. But I just think new energy is a big part of this, and new voices and new energy help the construction business get more cool and gain more color across the board. Thank you.
Thank you. So would you actually introduce yourself? And I just want to say, this is probably one of the hardest young men I've met in a long time. And I would like others to know who he is.
My name is Dominic Waters. I'm from here, Portland, Oregon, went to Grant High School, went to Portland State University, played basketball, went to NCAA tournament out of Portland State. Last time they were ever good, 10, 15 years, 14 years ago. Played professionally across Europe for 11 years. I was going back and forth with my family, and Mr. Joel offered me an opportunity to not really offer me anything, just told me, hey, what are you gonna do next? I've known you for this long. I think you'd be great in this space. Give it a try. And I jumped off the porch. It make money for a long time this past year. For my company, created partnerships, and I'm just thankful to be in this room and to be in construction because we're a part of changing the world and helping the world grow. And
So we're going to hear great things from Crossover. I know we are.
Yeah, I hope so.
And for the large contractors in the room, this is our next up and coming disadvantaged trade partner that's going to be on our job.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Thank
Any other questions? Do we have anything in the chat? There's no questions chat. Any other questions in the room for our panelists?
Have you guys had things people talk about presentation of the look or the feel of their clothes? I would shift that. I wear sweats every day, but I don't need to swing the hammer. Does it have to be? I don't know the OSHA rules, Should I need to specify? It has to be something where we can modify. Rules need to be changed because I just promise you that will help.
They've done so much to change the safety gear for women. I don't see why it wouldn't be something we can discuss on how to make the hats, the vest look cool.
Or let them
pants, I get it. So it's a discussion.
Clothing, not necessarily, I mean, just feeling cool. I don't know, like some people, I don't like to wear suits. Some people might like to wear carpenter jeans. Some people, I have the idea of me kneeling down on my knees in sweatpants. That I'm more of a blocker than you guys wearing jeans when you kneel down to do some work, What are the reasons why they're telling us, or the steel toe? Okay, what if I got my tennis shoes reinforced with steel toe tips? What if, now these things may not be a good ship, but what if we did some of these things that make the worker feel proud to be on the site? You're still gonna get a little dirty. I still wanna feel clean.
I took a set of my Johnson Murphy high top leather boots and had them put Keen soles on them. So I could still look like a business professional walking around the office, but then walk right on out to the job site that didn't require hard, the steel toes, because I could do that, because they looked cool and I felt cool walking out on the job site, looking still professional, but totally dialed for safety. So it's little things like that. I hear
The style of it is one way. There hasn't been a shift. The style of it has been just one way. Like we've talked about a lot in here, it's just been one way from what I learned into it. And think about this too. The first thing I did when I jumped into construction and going on job sites and noticing nobody cares about the construction worker. Nobody gives a F about their care. They sit on buckets and they eat sandwiches. They take walks, they eat in their trucks. Who cares about their workers? Nobody cares. Nobody's walking around. Joel Anderson does it. Walking around, making sure his employees are good, making sure they're fed, making sure they have wellness, making sure all those things are very, very important for people to feel important. I understand that coming from running basketball clubs for 11 years and quit partly because my bosses didn't appreciate me enough. And I know my value there. You couldn't run your team without me. I'm the point guard. You can't run your team. So you better respect me and make sure I'm okay. It's really a player. I call it a sport now. It's really a player sport. Us owners wouldn't be anything without our workers. So I don't care what color they are, build them up, because And the other thing in the education of it, what people don't understand is this with women, especially, I think it's not as much heavy lifting as people think construction is. Don't get it confused. The construction is all heavy lifting. We lift heavy once a week, maybe, to bring materials on site. And then we're building with those materials, you know? It's not a heavy lifting sport. That education needs to be said too. Not to scare people off, but they need to be felt like they're loved. I know workers don't feel like they're appreciated. Mine do.
Well, Dominic, I appreciate your fresh perspective, and
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
important for us all to get that.
Yes,
And and I would love to have a conversation with you on the side about our safety and our PPE,
Yes, thank
because it is important that people, when they come to work, feel good about themselves. And sometimes little things like the special safety glasses, the cool safety glasses, they make a difference. One of our giveaways, one of the giveaways I would carry around in my backpack when I was doing safety inspections was cool safety glasses that I would see the workers wear hunting, fishing, golfing, little things like that do make a difference. So thank you, I appreciate that.
Sorry if I talk, but I have one more thing also. You spoke about what the apprentices, you didn't have the right things, like you get a tool belt, you get tools, your normal colleagues will get those things. Why don't we build a program to where apprentice or new construction people instead of, because I remember when we hired a new employee, it's like, okay, you'll get a couple more bucks. My partner, you'll get a couple more bucks, but you get a belt and your tools. Why aren't we able to have a program to provide those things for new, so they don't have to, just like a scholarship for kids in lunch, school lunch? Why don't we provide these tools and things for people to be at the same level as their white counterparts or male counterparts, you know?
I just want to say that when I refer to tools, I mean the tools such as impact drivers, lasers, things that are not required by the individual to provide for themselves. These are things that the company fits the individual with. These are very expensive pieces of machinery. They can cost anywhere from $400 or $500 starting out easy. So that's what I mean when I say tools, as far as being set up.
Oh, I had a couple.
Okay. Real quick, Maura wanted to.
Yeah.
something here.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for bringing up this point about generational shift. This is definitely something that I'm seeing. I mostly study apprentices, right? So tend to be younger folks in the field. I hadn't thought about your clothes issue, but I mean, right? Like if it's in line with the safety lines, who cares, right? Let the folks wear their cool sweatshirts, right? That's fine. But I think the other thing you mentioned that really resonated with me about this sort of idea of workers feeling cared for. And that's something I've really seen in my research. One of the really surprising findings from the Bully Project was one of the services that they offer is, tools, clothing, and protective equipment, right? So it's things like making sure people have boots, making sure people have rain gear for their first day on the job, right? Those kind of very critical things that can be really expensive, especially if you're coming out of low wage work or poverty, right? And one of our findings was that people who got those services early on in their apprenticeship, usually it's, before their first day of work, that 6 years later, they were more likely to complete their apprenticeship than people that didn't get those services early on. So even a relatively small investment of like a pair of boots or like rain gear early on has this long-term impact. And I don't have a good explanation of why exactly that is, but I think it's what you're saying. It's that if you invest in people, they'll be more invested in the industry. And so I think there's, that money talks. Like if you want to show I value you, give people something that they need to be successful. And the last thing I would say is just thinking about the newest generation, sort of shifting attitudes towards work, right? This, I think that there's a lot of, grumbling about the new generation and their work ethic. This happens with every generation. Just want to point that out. But I think that also this generation, that they are a little bit more savvy, that they're not going to do more work than they're getting paid for. They want to be appropriately compensated and they want to be treated respectfully. And so I think that these are the folks that are going to be in these jobs, and whether or not we agree that those are reasonable things, that's what folks are looking for. And so contractors are going to be more competitive with the younger demographic if they can meet some of those, understand and meet some of those unique needs.
Thank you. You said, just a second, Mel, you said there was one in the chat?
Yes,
Okay,
or there's not one in the chat, someone has their hand raised.
okay. And then let's go to Mel as soon as we're done. Sheldon, did you have a question?
Yeah, I like the thing saying that yes, it's good to be cool, but some stuff you can't wear out there it's more of a danger than being cool. It's all right to wear your big baggy pants or your big sweatshirts or whatever, but there's just another hazard in your way of getting in your way of causing yourself might get an accident. But other than that, but the thing is, we have to intentionally do things. It's not being cool. I understand. We love that. We Anderson, all the companies that I see do provide lunchrooms where they can go eat, but people choose to eat in their car. People choose to go do other things. They can do it on their own, come to have camaraderie with other folks. But we still have to somehow, some way, get more retention of Black people when they come through this program and not want to leave. You know, it's one of those things. They come, they go. You need them, and they go, and you don't retain any of them. If you retain some of those folks, they'll still be around. And if they do a good job, yes. I'm not a person. I'm Black, and I don't have a problem with saying, hey, if you ain't showing up on time, I'm not gonna keep you. I'll be the first to let you go. I don't care what color you are. And I have laid off Black people because of that. I say be at this time. But those folks also have to give. We just can't give them and just take. They need to also give to the company to make them want to come back there. They get paid every day. It's their way of life. If they want to choose that way they want to do, that's fine. But they still have to come to work. And being cool is all right. But we need some kind of way to retention people in this business because we ain't getting it. It ain't there. And something has to be intentional in some way and somehow. If it's not intentional, we can talk about it till we're blue in the face. But we need more leadership. I can't stress having people in color that looks like someone that works there, to look and say, look where I've got there. And I can go talk to that person and he can explain how he got there. We need more leadership of people of color inside this business. And it ain't there. I'm done.
Thank you, Sheldon. Mel, you have something?
Yes, I think I got all the chemistry right. Okay. Here's where I think we have, it's not here where I know where we've made the mistake, and it's quite simple. We're planting the seed, we're planting it incorrectly. We keep planting the seed as construction is a viable option after college. Construction is a good option if you're not doing well in school. Construction is a good option versus military. Cut the shit. We build the world. We have to change the conversation to help people understand we're the coolest freaking people on the planet. You don't drive a car without contractors because we built a factory. You don't have a freaking toothbrush without contractors because we build it. You don't do an MRI in a hospital because we put the magnet in there. Stop selling our industry short. That's where we're making the mistake. Let them know how cool we are. When I drive to the richest neighborhoods in town, there's a freaking contractor's truck in almost all those driveways. We're not telling them the stuff that we do, the stuff that we have. We haven't sold the story. Stop playing second fiddle to all these other industries. We run the world, and let's own it and let's sell that.
Absolutely. Okay. Anything else in the chat? Anything from our presenters that you would like to add? Oh, okay. If there's nothing else, I would just like to thank everybody for coming today. Absolutely thanking our wonderful panelists.
I can't tell if that's intentional.
I know we have a lot of work to do, but I don't think we could have ended it any better than what Mel just said. You're absolutely right. You know, I've been in this industry for 35 years and have been just the intelligence of the people in this industry is amazing. And you're right. we build the world and we need to own it. So thank you for that. Okay, right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, those of you in the virtual world. Yes, you will be receiving slides and access to the recording. Thank you, Victoria.